All right, just one more little tweak here. That's it, got it. Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how to get a really awesome hard rock tone using Positive Grid's Bias Amp 2. So I'm going to share some really cool hard rock tones with you that I got from Bias Amp 2 here. And of course you'll hear them, but I'm also going to dig into the details and the settings and show you exactly how I got these tones. Here's the first hard rock tone I want you to hear, and after that I'll go through the amp that I'm using and the settings and all that good stuff. Now you're also going to hear that tone in the full mix in a second here, but first let's jump in the studio. I want to show you exactly how I got this tone with Bias Amp 2. Now what you're actually seeing here is the Bias FX2 plugin. What I'm doing is I'm using that for the effects, my stomp box, my reverb delay, all that good stuff. And I'm pulling in my Bias Amp 2 amps into this plugin. You can use these plugins together. And if you'd like to know how to do that, I've actually got a link in the description of this YouTube video. It'll take you to another video that shows you exactly how to do that. Now you may be asking, well Jason, why don't you just use the amps in FX2? Yeah, those amps are pretty cool and all, but I like the amp sounds, and I actually like the way the amps feel when I'm playing through them in the Bias Amp 2 a little better than the amps in FX2. All right, moving on. So I'm gonna go directly to the crunch amps in Bias Amp 2 here. Now you may be saying to yourself, Jason, dude, why are you going to the crunch amps if you're looking for a hard rock tone? Why don't you just at least go to the high gain amps? Now, you can get some good hard rock tones from the high gain amps, and actually we're going to go over one of those in a second here. But this particular amp in the crunch section is what you just heard, and I want to show you the settings here. So this is the British Lead 800, which that's obviously modeled after the Marshall JCM 800, well known for hard rock and heavy metal for that matter. But this gives you some killer hard rock tones. The first thing I do with this amp is I change the cabinet out, okay? So what I did in this case with the tone you heard earlier is I changed it over to the orange cabinet. That's the first thing I did. The second thing I did after that was I moved the mic. I kept the SM57 mic sim and I moved it up towards the cone. It was kind of further away from the cone by default, and I really don't like the way that sounds, at least in this plugin. So I just moved it closer to the cone and kind of positioned it where I like it. Next I went over to the gain, and I actually cut the gain back to about 7 or 8 there. I know these amps, a lot of times you like to crank the gain all the way up, and I'll do that on my lead tones. I'll actually do that. However, for rhythms, I like to set that gain back a little bit so you get a little bit more clarity in your notes. Next, I roll my bass back a little. This amp sim has quite a bit of bottom end here, and if you're going for a tone that you can use in the mix, you don't want to have too much bottom end. I actually talked about that in detail in the latest series I did for recording guitar with a real amp. Now, mids, I normally like to cut my mids when I'm playing metal, but remember we're going for a hard rock tone, so in this case I actually boosted my mids a little bit. My treble's boosted here a little, and the presence here, I cut that back a little here. I actually think that sounds a lot better than boosting the presence or even leaving it up the middle. Now, I want you to hear another tone with these same exact settings. However, I'm going to click on the overdrive pedal this time, and this is exactly why I like to use Bias Amp 2 with Bias FX2. Now that sounded a lot smoother and a little tighter than the first tone that you heard, And here's the overdrive settings here. I'll throw those on the screen. And we're going to be using this same overdrive pedal with these exact settings throughout the rest of this video. I just wanted you to hear the initial amp on its own by itself with nothing else matters. I just made a Metallica pun. Oh, and there's one more tone I want you to hear using this same amp, same settings, but just one slight change. Again, that was same amp, same settings, but that was with the Celestion greenback cabinet. Now, the Celestion is part of the Celestion Classic series. That comes with Bias Amp 2, I think, if you purchase the Elite package. And it's the same case if you were to purchase Bias FX2. I believe that comes with the Elite package. Don't quote me on that. Go to their website, because that deal could always change. I'm not really sure. But I wanted to share that with you because I've been a long time user of these cabinets with this plug-in, or the speakers rather. Actually, I have a Celestion cabinet shootout video up here. I'll throw a link to that in the YouTube description as well, so you can watch that later. Now, I told you I'd let you hear this amp in the full mix, and I'm gonna do that. Here it is. And actually, I'll share some details on how I recorded this track here as well. That clip had 2 rhythm guitar tracks, and those of you who have been following me for any length of time, you know that I love to record 2 tracks and hard pan each for my rhythms. It just gives you this nice, full, organic sound because each guitar is slightly different from the other, and it just sounds cool. Anyway, so what I did for the track you heard on the left side, that's my right side, other right, the left side, that one I used the British Lead 800 with the orange cabinet, first tone you heard. The other guitar that was panned right, oops, I screwed up again, that way. The other guitar was panned right, I was using the same amp, but with the Celestion greenback cabinet that we just went over. This is a little recording hack that I want to share with you guys. When I'm recording my rhythm tracks, I like to have different tones for each track. Not tones that are substantially different, but tones that just have some subtle differences, so there's a little bit more of a uniqueness that kind of comes together with the full mix there. Now, for the lead guitar track that you heard, I was actually using the orange cabinet, the Bias Amp 2 orange cab. I love that cab for lead guitar tracks, and of course on that track I had the gain on the amp cranked all the way up, and I added a little delay to that as well. We're not quite done yet. I've got one more tone I want to share with you, and this time we're actually going to head over to the high gain section to find our next hard rock amp, and I'm choosing the British Rock 50. Now, I'm assuming this is modeled after the orange rocker verb amp, which I actually played through a real rocker verb several videos back when I was at Replay Guitar Exchange. Awesome amp, I love that thing. I wish I could have brought it home with me, just didn't have the cash at the time, and I still don't. Now, here's the tone just by itself from this amp, and I'll go over the settings and all that good stuff after. Interestingly enough, my settings for this amp are really about the same as with the British Lead 800 that I played through earlier. My gain, about the same spot, somewhere between 7 and 8. My bass, I rolled that back just a hair, not quite as much as I did on the prior amp. The mids, they're boosted the same, the treble's boosted. Now, the only real difference here is for the orange, I actually boosted the presence just a little. I don't like to boost it too much because I don't like the frequencies that I hear when I boost presence a lot on any amp for that matter. So here I just boosted it just a little bit, and that really helps it shine through. The cabinet is what it's paired with by default. The only thing I did here was I moved the mic just a little bit. I do like to have the mic pretty close to the cabinet grill there, and also in this case I like to have the mic pretty much dead center of the cone there for this particular amp sim. And of course I'm gonna let you hear what this amp sounds like with one of the Celestion speakers here, so let's check it out. Alright, so same settings, same everything. The only thing I did was change the cabinet. I didn't even change the mic position. I just changed it to the Celestion greenback, the same Celestion speaker I used in the prior amp, the British Lead 800. Now, another Celestion speaker that just sounds phenomenal with almost any amp in Bias Amp 2 or FX2 for that matter is also the Vintage 30. For these particular amps I'm using for the hard rock tones, I just felt that I liked the greenback, the way the greenback was sounding a little bit better. Now, what I would normally do is record a track, and I'm going to let you hear the full mix in a second here, is I'd record a track using that Celestion greenback, right, pan that all the way that way, whatever that way is, because I kind of suck at directions today. The other guitar track, I'd pan all the way the other way, but I would use the Celestion V30 for that one, and that really gives you a nice tone. However, for the full mix that you're about to hear, I'm going to use the one with the default cabinet for the left side, which is the orange cab sim, and I'll use the Celestion greenback for the other side. Now, something I didn't point out before, actually for that lead guitar track, of course I cut the gain up on that, but I used the Celestion V30 speaker for that just to give me a little bit different tone. Now, I'd love to hear your comments on all the tones you just heard, and for my amp settings, I'm actually going to do a blog post for this video here to be on my website when that's available, because it's not going to be available the day I release this video, but when that's available, I will put that in the YouTube description, and that will have screenshots of all the amps and the settings and everything that I used in this video. So I'll put that out there for you very, very soon. And while you're there, check out the other links in there as well. I've got some other helpful videos in there. Also have my free practice guide that you can download if you don't have that yet. And of course, there's links to listen to my music, which I always appreciate you guys listening and sharing that with others. Before you go, I want to just briefly have a chat with you, and this is going to be our little tone talk here. And I think what I'm about to say is going to save you a lot of frustration, and that's why I'm going to say it. When you're working with amp sims or plugins or anything that's emulating an amp or a sound or cabinet, whatever it may be, don't get caught up in trying to sound exactly like someone else, exactly like another band, another artist, guitar player, even my tones. Don't get caught up into trying to sound exactly like someone else. You may dial in the exact tones I just did. You may even play with the same guitar, but your tone may sound a little different. And a lot of that comes from how you play. It comes from your approach to the instrument. It comes from the different feelings we put into that instrument. Some of us play more aggressively. I'm actually a little bit more of a lighter player. So your tone is going to sound bit different than what mine sounds like if you're an aggressive player. The other thing, and this is the most important factor when it comes to dialing in a tone, especially if you're trying to emulate someone else's tone, when you're listening to another band or an artist's song, you're not really hearing a true guitar tone. What you're hearing is a tone that's been recorded in the studio, but then it's been compressed, it's had an EQ added to it, it's probably had other plugins or maybe other hardware added to that track. Then it's been mixed and mastered, and when you master the song or an album, you've got some other things that are happening that are shaping and changing the way those guitar tones sound. So you can't really expect to dial in an exact tone with just an amp sim, or recording through a real amp for that matter, when all this other stuff has been done to that tone. You would need to use that guitar player settings, but also make sure everything else that was done to that guitar track and the song overall, the mix, the mastering, everything that was used, you would have to replicate all of that to get that exact guitar tone that you're hearing on that song or album. So just let that sink in, let it resonate with you that you're not really going to capture someone else's true tone, and I really don't think you should. I really want you guys to go after your own tone. Hey, use the settings I gave you in this video, and then when my blog post is available, I'll try to crank that out soon. You'll see the screenshots. You can have everything I used in that post there, but just know, even if you dial in those exact same settings, I want you to play around with those just a little bit and tweak it to your liking, because my settings, it fits me in my style of playing, but you may have to turn some of those little knobs a little, just slightly, to make it sound good for your style of playing. And that's what I want to emphasize right now, is focus on your tone, focus on your style of playing. It's okay to have a starting point. Again, I'm giving you these settings, and you can maybe look up some other guitar player settings, but don't get frustrated when it doesn't quite sound the same when you play your guitar. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a thumbs up if this helped you. Again, check out the links in the description of this YouTube video, and I'll see you on the next video. Until then, keep it metal, or I guess today we're keeping it hard rock. Good enough.